Hi everyone. So today, welcome to the Director's Desk. We are going to be discussing the world of talent acquisition. I'm Bina Hale and this is my lovely colleague
Catherine Bell.
The reason we're doing the Director's Desk is to share our experiences of what good looks like, what absolutely you shouldn't be doing. But today we are going to dive in to the world of talent acquisition, something that Catherine and I have had many years of experience in. And I think it's a really strategic part of any organisation, but sometimes is hugely undervalued.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think it's so important that we are kind of making sure this is at the forefront of the conversation, because it is something we feel very, very passionate about.
Perfect. Right, so let's do the basics, Catherine. Could you walk through on our basic definition of what talent acquisition is for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, before I start, I wanted to say, we're back. Sorry, I just needed to do that today. So yeah, absolutely. So talent acquisition, it is a strategic role. So there's a strong strategic element to talent acquisition. It involves workforce planning. It involves understanding the needs of the workforce. So, and also, if you are working in a particular area, actually, what are external insights telling you? So you can bring that to the forefront. Building a strong employer brand. I think employer brand and talent acquisition go hand in hand. I think that's critical.
Yes.
And then also really building, the main piece, a strong talent pipeline that actually feed the needs of the business.
And how is talent acquisition? Because obviously the terminology, the roles change and the terminology, if I can get my words out, has changed. So back in the day, it was called recruitment. And I genuinely believe that recruitment and talent acquisition are two very different things.
Yes.
So what's the difference between the two?
So I think you've got a very tactical element, and you've got a proactive element. So for me, recruitment delivery being one part, and I think there's absolutely a time and place for recruitment delivery. There has to be, very, very operationally focused. I think when talent acquisition comes in, it is all about that aligning to the company's goals and business strategy. So actually, I think it connects into strategic workforce planning, right? So if you do strategic workforce planning well, you do talent acquisition well. And building those solid relationships, or your internal clients or external clients, if we're looking at it from a recruitment lens, which I think we will do as well, because I think agency is a really great grounding for talent acquisition.
I completely agree. That. We've both done agency, hence the bias.
We have, yes.
Okay, great. I mean, in a nutshell then, talent acquisition is absolutely supporting the business to recruit, but having a strategic, proactive way of doing so, and not just being order fillers, which I think some recruitment functions can be, or glorified admin if they're too aligned to HR. Okay, perfect. Let's just touch on something that you said. I think the best days of my life were agency. I think those were wild times, Catherine, for both of us.
Work hard, play hard.
But you mentioned, and I do agree with you, that, if we look at talent acquisition teams that are successful, a lot of them come from agency backgrounds.
Yeah.
What do you think makes talent acquisition specialists stronger if they're from an agency background? What edge does that give them?
Honestly, I think it goes back to like the human skills as well. So that level of resilience, discipline, ability to build relationships, ability to negotiate as well. So you are taught those kind of core principles when you join a good headhunting firm. We both have. We both work for really good businesses and really good leaders that have taught you, this is the right way, and also you bring your own style, your own stance. That's what makes you authentic. But I do think the individuals, when I've worked in house, and obviously I had a strong agency career to a certain point, and then went in house, which was phenomenal. The best recruiters in house, my very strong opinion, have come from
I completely agree. And I've been the same. I mean, it's really interesting. I think we're going off track slightly, but I do want to cover this point that it's really hard to make that breakthrough from agency into, you know, a corporate organisation or in-house, as you said, because there's some bias. But I, as you said, I mean, my teams over the years have, the strongest recruiters have been ex-agency. They understand the pace. There's a hunger. There's a hunger to,
Yes.
you know, hunger to fill jobs. There's, you know, a passion to fill jobs. You can't build that.
No.
And I know that, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail, but we don't reward our internal recruitment teams the same as we do our sales teams. However, the good recruiters who are ex-agency have that hunger to win. It may not be financial. It may just be a dashboard of, I've filled X amount of jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gives them the edge, the ability to think on their feet, the ability to have credibility very, very quickly. And you can't teach that. I think for my kids, if I'm honest, I have said to them that when they start off in the world of work, I'd really like them to start in agency, because you're thrown at the deep end. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of sink and swim. You've got to develop the gift of the gab, which I think a lot of people do.
They do.
And let's be honest, none of us like the wide boy agency recruiter. I mean, the days of that are long gone. But it does give you a lot of credibility. And as I've developed through my career, and as you have, I've met a lot of operations directors, a lot of senior commercially focused individuals that all started in agency.
Absolutely. And that kind of strong sales.
Yeah.
The sales back. Because it is sales.
Life is a sell, though, right?
It is. Life and actually,
is
you've
a
got
sell.
to hustle. I talk about hustling. Do you remember, though, the days when, you know, it's that real competitive edge? We've spoken about being competitive and kind of, you know, winning.
Yeah.
You know, let's win. And that kind of, you know, yes, I've got... It's in, close, ring the bell.
Oh, the bell. Gosh, I mean, I still get a buzz now, though. If someone asks me, even after all these years, even though I'm not in core recruitment, if I'm asked to source someone for them, I get really excited.
Yeah, I'm like, I can do this.
I can do this. And there's the buzz of finding that person, getting them in, getting them interviewed. But going back to the bell, oh my God, the competitive. I remember back in the day in agency, in my early 20s, I had my annual review. Do you know how competitive I was? I got everyone's results, put them in a pie chart, and showed that I think it was 70% of the revenue that year had come from me. And I asked for an extra bonus. I got in so much trouble.
Well, no, but you I hope you got it.
I didn't. But I did. But that is it. And I think you're right. You know, life is, you know, what are the skills? We've done a few episodes on skills missing. Or the skills that need developing. That emotional intelligence, that ability to read people, who knows that better than a recruiter?
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely.
They are so undervalued. I really do think they're undervalued.
They are. And I think you know, we speak a lot about building solid relationships as well. And you do that. People remember you. People buy into people.
Absolutely.
And I know we're going to go on to the value of talent acquisition. I think a true talent acquisition function showcases their value through the relationships that they do build. Yes. And that is a skill in itself, but it needs to be nurtured.
And it is a skill. It's not just a skill, as you said, for your talent acquisition team. It's a core skill in the world of work. I mean, I'm starting to think there should be a university degree based around recruitment.
Well, there are a lot more, you know, I've seen a few very off-piste degrees recently, so who knows? Yes,
no, I think there's a lot of skill to be learnt very quickly in those environments. Let's move on to why are talent acquisition teams such an integral part and such an important part of an organisation. I mean, firstly, it's the first interaction, and I've always preached this for years when I managed large talent acquisition teams, that you are the face of the organisation. And that is why they are ultimately the most important part of your business.
Yeah, 100%. You know, first impressions really
absolutely
do count.
They do.
People talk. If a candidate has a negative experience when they're going through, you know, any form of recruitment process, that is going to affect their decision making at the end. people talk as well. So if we think about, individuals that also had a bad experience, they're going to go and tell people that they've worked with, who knows who they know, new business wise as well. So many connotations that the experience has.
No, absolutely. And how many times, going back to our talent acquisition days, have we had conversations with candidates that have turned jobs down because the recruitment experience was so bad? Because and I've supported candidates with that, junior or senior, that have sat there and said to me, I'm not going to take this job on Bina because the interview experience with that organisation was so bad. The interviewer was late. I didn't get feedback, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Because I think they're right. It gives you a potential insight to what the organisations like to work for. So if your talent acquisition team are crap, you haven't supported them, they don't have the skill set to do that, and you haven't hired the right people, you're losing out on talent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that you've made a point which we will come to around kind of that level of support that we give them as well. I mean, the experience that a candidate has is so important. So important. I mean, if you went into a restaurant, right?
Yeah, what I was going to say, that restaurant we were in, not to name any restaurants, we may do in future podcasts, but that restaurant that we were in, renowned, great restaurant, great quality food. How was the service?
Well, it was not good. And that's an understatement, right?
Yeah,
we didn't go back. We won't go back. We won't go back. Review-wise as well, we're telling people don't go back.
Yeah.
So that has got a knock-on effect to their, revenue, etc.
Yeah.
So,
and it's that brand. It doesn't matter how amazing your brand is. If the experience that people have during the interview process with you is bad,
yes,
it doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. Like the restaurant, people will not come.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's quite interesting. So according to the 2022 survey done by Talent Board, 77% of candidates said that their experience during a hiring process influences their perception of the organisation. So exactly what we've said. So if that perception is bad, then that correlates to them accepting a job or not.
Yeah.
77% of people think the same as we do.
It's high.
Yeah,
that's high.
Huge percentage.
And that's unacceptable. And I do think just on that point, there's a level of consistency as well, because I think sometimes you'll have two individuals going for a very similar role, but they might have two different recruiters.
Yes.
One has a great experience, the other not so great. So actually I think there's that level of consistency that the company needs to support.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Go on then.
It's not
we like your fun facts.
I do like my fun facts.
They're never fun though.
They're never fun.
They're good, but they're not fun.
I'm trying. I'm trying to make a positive stance on maybe a negative.
Go on then.
One.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. So companies with strong employer branding see 50% more qualified applicants, and that was highlighted in LinkedIn's 2022 Global Talent Trends report.
Right. So what are we saying there? So we're saying that candidates are attracted initially to the better brands. Yeah. 50%.
Well, the branding. So, and we said employer branding and talent acquisition go hand in hand.
Right, okay.
So I think company that has stronger employer branding, well, obviously we've got it here, that have a higher influx of qualified candidates.
And then 77% of those want a decent experience.
Well, exactly. So it goes hand in hand, right?
It does, absolutely. So let's look at, the impact of a poor hiring decision by an organisation. Mm-hmm. So let's say your talent acquisition team are not supported, you haven't got the right people in place, and because of that, you're not making the right hiring decisions. So a poor hire, how much you reckon that would cost a company on average? It's quite a bit of money.
15 grand?
30,000.
Wow.
So that is the cost of every single, broadly, of a poor hire. And that includes the cost of people taking time out to train them, the cost of training, the lack of productivity because they're taking longer to get to the point that you need them. But that is a substantial amount of money, which means that organisations want to get talent acquisition right. And that data came from the the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, REC, in 2022, so very recent data. So it is incredibly important to invest in your talent acquisition teams to make sure 30 grand a hire, I mean, that is a lot of money.
It's an obscene amount of money
It
for a
is.
hire. And I
could
think
buy a nice new car with that.
Birkin handbag. That's an investment. But also, you think, not just that, the financial implications, the stress as well. I remember it's that the bad hire. My goodness, I remember a client once, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Came to me and they'd recruited the same role 3 times, so they'd made a bad decision on hiring. So, and I think,
had they, or did they not have the right interviewers or the right process?
This is exactly it. So it kind of goes, goes back to, actually, let's not put a plaster on it.
Yes.
Let's understand what the source is.
Yeah.
What's the insights? What are we finding out here? So, huge implications there. Aligned to that, think about the job market. It is competitive. There are a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
So, and I think that also needs to be taken into consideration. If a candidate also feels undervalued as well in that process, we want the best of the best, right? So if a candidate feels undervalued through the process, they're going to go to a competitor. They're going to tell that competitor that they've had a better experience. So that is another thing that really needs to be nipped in the bud.
I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking of occasions where I've worked, or my team have worked for organisations back in the recruitment days in agency, where we've managed to support organisations to take people on, even though when other organisations are paying bigger salaries just because the recruitment process was better. I've had senior candidates say, do you know what, there's a £5,000-10,000 difference. However, the recruitment experience with you and the organisation, a lot more prompter, feedback, people were nice, they'd read my CV in advance. I felt wanted, and because of that, I'm going to take this role that's paying me less.
Yeah.
Getting that right is such an advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, getting it right with the right candidate, what recruiters also need to realise is that they are helping to shape the workforce of the future by bringing in the right individuals. Even, I think you and I have spoken at length around true sourcing. Now, I believe sourcing is a skill.
Oh, absolutely.
It really is.
It is a skill.
And it helps build those relationships as well. So if a recruiter actually wants to feel noticed by the business and give that level of good experience, not only to the candidate, but also to the client they're recruiting for, actually having that level of sourcing, that level of insight, being able to give a different direction to the client themselves, or how getting them to think differently about the role.
I think those points are really valid, and I think for me, when I've joined organisations over the years, I've taken talent acquisition functions that are only talent acquisition functions in name, that are glorified admin functions where they're taking orders from the business, and made them into true consulting. The job of talent acquisition is, as you said, to consult the business.
Yes.
What you're recruiting for, does it exist?
Yeah.
Yes or no? How much you're going to have to pay? Actually, you're not right. It's consulting the business, not taking orders. That is a true talent acquisition function.
Totally. Consulting, advising. Actually, does that exist?
Yeah.
Are they looking for a unicorn?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how you build your credibility. Challenging the organisation, right, you've recruited this person 3 times. Why? What's happened? Have you not trained them particularly well? Or actually, that role spec doesn't exist. We're going to change the job spec. We're going to change how we're marketing it. And that's how you build your credibility. And not to go off piece too much, but I think the problem with talent acquisition for a lot of organisations is bolted onto HR. So talent acquisition sits under HR as a function in most organisations. And with that, their particular connotations, it's nothing like HR. It's more aligned to sales. And sooner organisations realise that and start giving them a respect and the resource and the support they need, the sooner they'll flourish.
Totally. And actually going back to that exact point around kind of educating a business, consulting a business, an example that I wanted to share was I was leading a team who, we had that unicorn scenario. It doesn't exist. So the team, in order to actually build that relationship with that particular client, I said, right, let's go and market insights one. Let's go and see what else is there that aligns to the skills and the requirement of that role.
Yeah.
So my team literally cold outreach, went and did some insights, realised that actually this client could get the same level of output from a candidate who was a slightly lower level, however had done, had got multiple skills that were transferable into this role. And in turn, that led, so doing that, putting the candidate in place that perhaps the client hadn't thought about before, led to I'm going to say, maybe I'm exaggerating it slightly, but this is what I was told, led to an 20% increase in sales for that client by having this particular candidate. And again, we had more business from this client because they were like, actually, Catherine Bell and her team, they didn't just say no. They were like, hang on a minute. That doesn't exist. However, why don't we look at this? What are your thoughts?
And that's exactly, exactly what they need. It's that ability to consult, help them improve their commercials. Yeah. And like a sales team, a recruitment team does exactly that at the other end.
They do.
Getting the best people in who will elevate the business's profits.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, I think, we've touched on it slightly, but why should, I'm quite passionate about this, and there's lots of posts I've done over the years on why talent teams should be treated and recognised the same as your sales teams. But why should talent acquisition teams be seen in the same light? What's your view?
So in-house talent acquisition teams need to have that level of recognition, and I truly believe that, because they are ultimately selling their company to potential clients. I'm calling them clients. They're candidates, clients. It's the same piece.
It is. It absolutely is.
And I think that having, they've ultimately got some really key goals to fulfil. I'm making an assumption they will have. All the talent acquisition teams I've run in the past have had really robust KPIs to work towards. And one of them is actually bringing in solid talent and support, which obviously if they're the right talent, they're going to be retained in the business. So I think giving talent acquisition the foundations to really do that and be able to sell a company in the external market.
And again, my point earlier, and I completely agree with that, I think, should they sit with sales and not HR? I mean, that's a very bold statement, but in my head, when I've looked at sales teams, I've looked at operational teams, the skills, the language, the pace is very much aligned to that and not to HR. I think sitting under HR, I think their wings are clipped. They are genuinely, their ability to influence, unless you've got a very strong leader.
Yeah.
Like us and like others that we've worked with that really push back. I see a lot of talented talent acquisition specialists that are stuck in this bubble between the business and HR business partners and do not get the opportunity to build those relationships, influence, be that true consultant. And I think businesses are missing a trick. And again, your ability to meet your diversity stats, your innovation stats, higher customer employee satisfaction comes down to your talent acquisition team recruiting the right people.
Yeah, it does. And I think, this goes back to the bit we said at the beginning, agency. So why are agency recruiters, in my mind, more successful? And that's from companies that I've worked with before, more successful than individuals that haven't come from that background. Because when you work for an agency, it is...
it's so cutthroat, isn't it?
It is cutthroat. It is sales. You're only as good as your last month.
You are. And it's really stressful. I mean, God, how many times have we, back in the day, we're 10 grand off our figures, we're running around to get them all, you get a huge bollocking, fired.
I think
stealing work from your colleagues. It's cutthroat, ruthless. Call comes in for Bob. I love saying Bob. I don't know why. I mean, there's loads more names than Bobs in the world.
I think Bob's good.
Bob.
We need to have a Bob mascot, actually. That's going to be... I'm going to find one.
You're going to get Bob to sit in. But, how many times have you... I mean, I remember doing it. Call comes in for Bob. You don't tell Bob. You go and see that client, win the work, and you hit your targets. I mean, it is bloody cutthroat.
Don't ever doubt. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think... I do think it has... I like that, though. I work well in that environment. But
you've got to tone that down.
I think it has evolved. We're going back onto our generations.
Yes.
We are. But yeah, I do agree with that. McKinsey, however, fact.
Fun fact,
not
or just
fun
a fact?
Just a fact. I'm going to be more demure about it. So. 2022 data from McKinsey shows that companies that prioritise talent acquisition see 2.5 times more revenue growth than their peers.
And when they mean by prioritise, they mean set it up properly,
they do.
Have the right people.
Foundation.
Right.
So having the foundations in place to build on.
Yeah.
And I agree with that.
I do. I always did. When I built my teams, I invested a lot of time in hiring, interviewing, spending time with each and everyone.
Onboarding.
Coaching. I mean, I don't know if you ever did this, but back in the day, I used to sit and I'm not sure if you're allowed to do this. I'd listen to my team's phone calls, and then I would sit them down and go, that was great, that wasn't, try and be more fluid with this. Listen to their phone calls to get them up to speed.
Do you know, that's so funny. That's brought me on to an example I had. So I, literally starting off, my boss at the time would literally hang up. Do it again.
I'm like, oh, really?
Like, what? Do it again. Da-da. Do it again.
I like him.
I learn very quickly. I mean, but this thing you do learn, and you become, that level of, again, going back to resilience.
Yes.
Resilience and determination. I was determined. I was going to win.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot more to that agency life cycle, and I think there's a lot we could take into corporates from that.
Oh, we loved it, didn't we?
Oh, I used to love it. If I didn't have kids, I'd still be doing the rounds. It just becomes a bit much when you've got kids. The agency starting at 8, finishing at 10, working, going to the pub, working, going to the pub, working, going to the pub. Those were the days.
They were the days. And again, I think it probably has changed, generations. They might want to, but
it is interesting.
We can reminisce.
Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes feel like I'd like to go back to the agency days for the fact that, from what I hear, it's not as efficient. If you're a good recruiter now, you're raking the cash in. You really are, because that speed, that ability to think on your feet seems to have gone. And I think a lot of, recruiters and directors have moved in-house, and I think a lot of the skill sets of training the younger generation has disappeared.
Yeah, definitely. It goes back into the upskilling and training. There is something, I know we've spoken about guest speakers, but there is somebody that I want to get in on this, because I think it could be a very, very good debate.
We'll definitely get someone in to have a chat. So in terms of final stats from me on this particular section, so companies that invest in their talent acquisition team see a 30% reduction in the cost per hire.
Yeah.
As suggested by the Society of Human Resources in their 2023 research. Well, of course it would. If you've got a good recruiter who is, good at recruiting, you're saving a huge amount in-house on agency fees. I mean, over the years, I joined a couple of organisations who were spending, back in the day, 4 million on hiring. Within a year, we'd reduce that to a fraction.
Yeah.
By having the right people and sourcing directly. I think people forget, like the sales teams, how much money a properly constructed talent acquisition team can save you.
Yeah, definitely. I on that, I remember having somebody that worked for me in-house that was a very strong agency recruiter, and the hiring manager had an agency working on this role alongside, and this, my my team member was like, do you know what, I'm going to beat the agency. Was literally going, beat the agency.
Brilliant.
Love that.
Yeah.
Let's touch on some key trends.
Okay.
So the hiring landscape has changed, does continue to change. I know we've spoken about kind of hybrid, and we will continue to talk about hybrid here. Post-pandemic, remote working has become the norm, a bit more hybrid now in certain companies. What's your perspective on that?
On the hybrid piece and how people are hired. I mean, it's become a challenge, right? And again, this is where a good talent acquisition consultant, or I see talent acquisition as consulting the business, so the consulting team should be pushing back on organisations because they're losing out on talent.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we've gone back to the office. A lot more organisations are looking to do a lot more of that in the new year. And I think over the next 12 months, we'll see, unfortunately, in my view, a lot of people back into the office 4 or 5 days a week. And I think that's quite a sad situation to be in, for many reasons, for many people. And you're not holding on to the right talent. So I think the landscape has changed. And I think it's for talent acquisition teams to have the ability to challenge the organisation to say, look, you're going to miss out on this really good, diverse pool of talent because you won't flex. And it's not just taking that as read, it's really challenging the organisations. And I think a lot of organisations will have to see sense over the next 24 months and realise that the landscape has changed and you will lose talent, and you're prepared to do that just to have someone in the office. And I think the other impact we've seen is recruitment has become a lot more global. So organisations and how they look at strategies and how they recruit is much more of an inclusive global way of hiring. We've got a lot more different talent pools as well. So the ability to manage that as talent acquisition teams is really important. Not only to hit diversity figures, genuinely hit diversity figures, not just tick boxes, but if you really want that broad thinking, diverse thinking, where everyone doesn't look the same, your talent acquisition teams have to lead that.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, there are a couple of examples when I've spoken to ex-colleagues of mine that work for multiple different businesses. Clients, they've had clients that are much more focused on hiring from underrepresented groups. Yes. And I think where talent acquisition can play a really big part in that is really consulting them on some trends and insights, because it's not just about ticking a box. I feel very passionately about this, and it's not just putting a plaster on it. It's about actually, right, if you want to hire from this underrepresented group, then actually maybe we need to look at where your role is based, because actually here, you know, you look at the geographical area, you don't have that, you know, there. So why don't we look at here where you've got a strong office, you've got, I don't know, a tech presence here. Let's look and see what we can do. So it's about really understanding the business and not just ticking a box and saying yes. It's about educating and consulting. Yeah,
and I think, you know, as I alluded to earlier, I think moving away from sitting under the HR banner is where they get the ability to do that. I do feel talent acquisition teams are constrained by that. The last fact I have before we conclude on this episode is from the CIPD 2023, so very, very recent. According to their recent reports, 62% of UK employers are reporting difficulty in filling their roles. And I think a lot of that, from what I'm seeing in our networks and conversations, is talent acquisition teams that are just thrown together without the correct skill set, supports and training, and actually hiring the wrong people in the first place. Yeah. Talent acquisition is not admin. Talent acquisition is a sales skill. And the sooner that organisations realise that, but 62%. And this is why, you know, if you look on any job boards, the salary of talent acquisition has increased substantially over the years, because it's a skill that a lot of companies need that is lacking. Yeah. It's not about picking up the phone going, hello, would you like this job? And okay, we'll put you forward. there's a lot more to it. And I think there's a lot of naivety out there of what talent acquisition actually is. It's a skill. I think you either have it or you don't to some extent. And I do think a lot of the good individuals with the skill come from agency. You know, it's so brutal, as we've said. If you last in agency, or back in the day, if you lasted, I'm not sure how it is now, but if you lasted in an agency, you were good.
Yeah, there definitely needs. I think that the skill that is needed does need to be tested at the beginning of anyone going into a talent acquisition function is that motivation.
Yeah.
So motivation's there. That's something you can't teach. You could support through the culture of the business if that aligns. But I do agree with you, and I think that there needs to be that level of investment in talent acquisition. I think that 62%, 2023, I imagine that has increased.
I think it probably has.
You know, so it's about actually businesses taking note of this and actually going, do you know what, I am going to invest and I'm going to think about talent acquisition.
Absolutely. So in concluding today, your talent acquisition teams are vital to the success of your organisation. I think that's very clear from the conversation that we've had. Investing in your talent acquisition teams can support your commercial growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Supporting overall performance of your business, you know, by having the right individuals on board in talent acquisition who can sell your company
absolutely
to the external market, bringing in talent, creating pipelines.
And I think, you know, having worked in talent acquisition myself and Catherine, also you, for a number of years, I do think they're underappreciated. So for employers that are listening, go and pat your talent acquisition recruiters on the back, reward them, thank them the same as you thank your sales team. You will retain them, and if they're good, they are like gold dust and someone's ready to snap them up. But this has been good.
It has been good. I feel like we could, you know, talk about this further. I think there are so many different pockets, and I think there'll be a lot of people that do have strong opinions on this.
Yes, oh, absolutely. But for now, this has been the Director's Desk. Thank you so much for joining us again today. And we'll speak to you soon.
We'll speak to you soon. Do subscribe, do like, do comment. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much.